All right, welcome to the Young Turks. I'm your host, Cenk Uygur. I've got a lot of exciting news for you guys today because that's what we do on the Young Turks. We've just got a couple of days left before the election. And so today I roll out my predictions. Ooh, it's a big day. It's a big day. How many seats will Democrats pick up in the House? How many will they pick up in the Senate, if any? Interesting. That's coming up later in the program. But I'd also like to announce important, exciting news for the Young Turks. We are now on 4 new stations in Philadelphia, DC, Boston, and New York. And I love this network that we're on. WMCN in Philly, WMDE in Washington, WWDP in Boston, and WRNN in New York. So welcome to all those stations. We are on 7 to 9 p.m. Eastern every night there. Looking forward to sharing the news with you guys and our perspective and commentary and enthusiasm. As you will see for the new viewers, we're quite enthusiastic. We're enthusiastic about the news. We're enthusiastic about being progressive. And recently, a reporter called me part of the fighting left. And I said, I like the sound of that. So now, in today's show, I also have other news for you guys, including Donald Trump pretty much admitting that he lies. I'm going to show you then his explanation of why he lies, and then Fox News' defense and how the media should just bow their heads and report it as if it's true. That's also a little bit later in the program. But unfortunately, we start with a fairly common theme these days in the Republican Party, which is fear and loathing. So they have been driving hatred in so many different ways. And it used to be predominantly against Muslims and Mexicans, M&Ms, as they have been doing that for over a decade. It's not just Donald Trump. Republican Party has done that for almost literally as long as I can remember. Well, certainly as long as I've been covering politics. And I remember writing an article about the M&Ms about a dozen years ago. But now they have added to their repertoire, and the reality is, of course, they always wanted to. In a lot of their voters also did not like other groups of people, and so their disdain for African Americans in this country is legendary. They literally had a strategy called the Southern Strategy around it, and now we have gotten to the bottom of the barrel with anti-Semitism. So let's start there, and then we'll take it from there, unfortunately, as they seem to be attacking almost every group. Literally, in this show, we have a Republican attack against Jews, against Latinos, and against blacks. So the Muslims are starting to feel a little left out, but they're not in the news today. All right, let's go over here and start with the first story. Okay. So the Republicans have been on a warpath against many different minorities. Unfortunately, the latest is Jewish Americans, and there was an extreme right-winger who did the attack in Pittsburgh, killed 11 people at a Jewish synagogue, 6 others injured. And I want to tell you about what a Republican politician is doing. But before we do that, we sent Emma Vigeland, our reporter, to cover a Trump rally down in Florida. And I thought that this gentleman that she ran into was unfortunately emblematic of a lot of the right wing these days. Now get a load of what you see tattooed on his back. Let's watch.
So that's Obama, that's Hillary Clinton. Who's that? Oh, down there, Osama bin Laden?
No, that's the Ayatollah Khomeini, and then the worst enemy of the United States is on top. Don't you know who that is?
On top,
George Soros, who is the worst enemy of the United States.
So on your back, you got George Soros, Hillary Clinton, Obama, and the Ayatollah?
As negative, not positive.
Right.
You can see Michael the Archangel casting the demon into the abyss, and then you have below them the enemies of the United States and its Constitution.
So can you explain why Soros, Obama, Clinton, and the Ayatollah are the enemies of the state?
Oh, come on, you know that. If you don't know that, you shouldn't be at a Trump rally. That means that you are...
You're
101 if you don't know George Soros is the biggest, largest donator to anti-American causes.
Okay, so this conspiracy theory against George Soros has been anti-Semitic from the day one. And so if you notice, he is above Obama, the president. Hillary Clinton, who ran for president, was Secretary of State. And randomly, again, on top of Khomeini as well, George Soros deeply, deeply opposed to Ayatollah Khomeini. So why is he at the top? Because he's the puppet master. And so if you said, hey, look, they're just against big donors. Well, I love that talk. I'm against big donors. But if you talk about it in terms that are related to their actual donations, the Koch brothers, they're not Jewish, and they give more than Soros does. You got the Mercers, you got Adelson. It's a mixed group of people. It's not remotely just a Jewish phenomenon. Of course not. It's a giant country, and unfortunately, we have open bribery in this country. In fact, the Republican Party revels in it. That is why they succeed so much, is because they buy so much ads with the money that they get from giant corporations and the very, very wealthy. That is a phenomenon that is upsetting to most Americans. But that's a different thing than saying one guy is the puppet master who controls everything, and oh, look at that, he happens to be Jewish. That is an old anti-Semitic trope that has been around for a long, long time. So if you're talking about policy and you say, hey, listen, I want to take the Soros money and the Koch money and the Bloomberg money and all the different kinds of, and by the way, Chevron money and Apple money and giant corporations, whether you like them or you don't like them, Nike, Starbucks, hey, I think they do a lot of positive things in the world, Amazon, et cetera. You want to take all their money out? Great. You want to take the union money out? Great. We should finance elections, the public, not the private entities, because if they do, then the private financing leads to private interests ruling over all of us. But that is not what this guy is talking about. Obviously, he's an incredibly unsophisticated dolt, which is unfortunately very true of a lot of Trump voters. And so he's saying, Soros, he's the main evil guy, and he's an enemy of the Constitution. Your guy, Donald Trump, just said that he would like to rewrite the Constitution and take away birthright citizenship, and he'd like to do it with an executive order. But wait, I thought you guys said you hated executive orders. I thought you said you care about the Constitution and that Soros and Obama were enemies of the Constitution. Here's Donald Trump trying to destroy the Constitution without going through an amendment. If he proposed an amendment, that's a totally different thing, and I'm super open to that. Not on birthright citizenship. He can propose anything he likes, but I would fight against that on policy grounds. But amendments are part of the Constitution, not an executive order that signs away a core part of the Constitution. So the bottom line is they don't actually care about the Constitution. They don't care about any of that. They just keep pushing these anti-Semitic conspiracy theories, and Donald Trump did it again yesterday. They asked him about the caravan. They said, now there's theories out there that, in the right wing, extreme right wing, that Soros is funding the caravan. Total nonsense, totally made up. And other anti-Semitic conspiracy theory, the Jews control everything, including a caravan coming out of Honduras. What the hell would anyone Jewish or Soros have to do with that? And Trump said, yeah, I think that's possible. He's a monster, man. So I said this a long time ago, right when he got into office. I said, look, the bottom of the barrel is anti-Semitism. Once we've gotten there, then all the demons have been released. Because that was logically a forbidden topic in America because of, World War II and the Holocaust, where 6 million Jews died. So, and normally politicians in America don't go there. But I realized when I interviewed David Duke back before the 2016 election, right around when the campaign was getting started, David Duke did not talk about blacks or Latinos much. He was obsessed with the Jews. And I noticed that that's what the extreme right wing, at the end of the day, they come back to the Jews. And so, and now it's on their backs, it's tattooed. Trump reinforces it. We got a synagogue attack. We got bombings, including a bomb sent to George Soros. Yet they are totally unrepentant. This is after the bombing. This is after the shooting of the synagogue. Now look, that guy could say, synagogue. I'm not saying it's anti-Jewish. I'm just saying, he's the primary evil, right? Okay, I don't buy that. But secondly, they sent a bomb to Soros's house. Don't care. Because look, that's domestic terrorism, and they're cheerleading it. So now we have another case of a Republican politician with another anti-Semitic attack. This guy is state senator in Connecticut, Ed Charmut, and his opponent is Representative Matthew Lesser, who happens to be Jewish. So get a load of the poster that he put up, a flyer criticizing Matt Lesser. It says, "Vote no on Matt Lesser," and it has a picture of him looking greedy with large eyes, holding a bunch of money. Now, wait a minute. How does that make any sense? First of all, there's an older guy holding onto his piggy bank, but Lesser and the Democrats want to protect Social Security. Mitch McConnell and the Republican leadership have talked about cutting Social Security and Medicare. So why put a money-grubbing picture of someone on a flyer like that, totally irrationally and not connected to anything? Well, hey, look at that. I got a Jewish opponent and he's a money grubber. Oh, oops, did I put out an anti-Semitic flyer? They're disgusting, man. So, of course, he took a lot of heat for that, and he must have gotten the talking to. I don't think it worked. So they put out this statement. Now, I want to read you this statement on his Facebook page, but understand that this is not the Republican candidate. It's his staff that put out this statement. They said, "The entire campaign committee, which includes members of the Jewish community, never discussed or considered Mr. Lesser's ethnicity, race, religion, or any other personal characteristics of Mr. Lesser. And it was never our intention for the mailer to be anything more than a reflection of Mr. Lesser's policy record." Right, hilarious. "However, it is clear now that the imagery could be interpreted as anti-Semitic. For that, we deeply apologize, as hate speech of any kind does not belong in our society and especially not in our politics. Except you guys are the ones who made the flyer and sent it to everyone. And then when you got your hand caught in the anti-Semitic cookie jar, all of a sudden you're like, oh, hate speech. Oh, there's no place for it. Except for when we were printing the flyers and sending them to everyone. But now we got caught, so we feel bad." Lesser himself pointed out, he said that he had not been contacted by Charma or state Republican leaders since the mailing went out. So there was no personal apology. There was just a bland statement from his office. What did the candidate himself say, though? Before he was admonished by other Republican leaders, he said, "The mailer makes the point that if elected, Matt Lesser will undoubtedly vote to hike people's taxes again and again. Those wishing to portray a graphic illustration as something hateful are completely wrong." So he doesn't believe it. That statement they put out later, that's not him. He didn't sign it. He didn't say it. He didn't call Lesser. He hasn't told anyone in the media that he apologizes for it. And his real reaction was, yes, so what? What are you gonna do about it, right? And if you actually had policy differences and you were worried that that Soros contributes too much, this guy's gonna raise taxes, et cetera, and that their money, are you kidding me? How about your donors? How about your donors, Republicans? But it's not convenient to attack them. One, because they're bribing you. Now in America, we have the insanity of legal bribes called campaign contributions and independent expenditures, but you like those bribes when they go to Republicans. And number two, some of your donors happen to be Jewish because it's a big country, and a lot of them aren't. Well, that doesn't get fear and hatred going in our base enough. So let's pick one Democratic donor who is Jewish, let's attack him nonstop, and if you got a Jewish opponent, make him seem like a money grubber too. This is what the Republican Party has been reduced to. That's in Connecticut, that's not in Mississippi. That's in Connecticut. And by the way, very good reason as to why they finally pulled it off is because probably a lot of Republican voters in Connecticut also happen to be Jewish. Of course, not a majority, it's a minority, but and Jewish Americans generally vote for Democrats, over 70% Democrats, but they have to have some voters, supporters, et cetera, that are Jewish in Connecticut that's back the Republican Party. But guess what? You should go to a doctor if you're one of those minorities, Jewish, Latino, Black, Muslim, et cetera, gay American, that is voting for a Republican thinking they're on your side. They're not remotely on your side. They're coming to get you. And they're proud of it. And they got it tattooed on their back. They got it printed in flyers. They got their president egging on anti-Semitism after the synagogue shooting. So that's today's Republican Party. Okay. Now we move to hatred against African Americans. And by the way, if this is your first time watching the show, you're beginning to get a sense of it. Okay. So now, there's a race in Pennsylvania where you've got a wonderful progressive, Jess King, She is running against first-term Republican Lloyd Smucker. And Jess King's a just Democrat. She's uncorrupted, does not take corporate PAC money. You should look into supporting her. She's been on Rebel Headquarters, which is part of the TYT network. And so a lot of people are excited to support her, including Amanda Kemp and her husband, Michael Gimenez. So they went to go canvassing in Pennsylvania, where this race is. And they went to Manheim Township, because that's where the race is. And they went to a gated community called Bent Creek Community. And they happen to be a biracial couple. Amanda Kemp is African-American and her husband is white. But they run into a woman in the gated community who apparently came out with shears in her hand, so I guess she was doing gardening. And she was quite moved immediately. She was angered. Now that's curious. I mean, you have no idea what these folks are even doing. Why would you come out guns blazing, or in this case, I guess, shears blazing? Well, I mean, here's a biracial couple in her gated community. I'm going to tell you about that community in a second. And so she asked them, what are you doing here? Does she often ask other people in that community, hey, what are you doing here? Does she know every single person in that community? Is she sure that they're not, they don't normally live in that gated community? It's hard to tell, okay? Also incredibly easy to tell. Anyway, she says, what are you doing here? And they say, oh, we're canvassing. We came for a specific person in this community. We want to tell them about Jess King, but then we decided that we were going to just knock on doors. This, by the way, happens all across the country. It's actually a wonderful thing where volunteers go out and talk to their neighbors, talk to people in the community, and it's a personal interaction. I think it's one of the best things about grassroots politics in America. So of course, this woman wanted to put an end to it. So she asked them about it, and they said, well, we're canvassing, which is very normal, but we're canvassing for Jess King. So they're perfectly honest about it. So what is the reaction? The woman whose name is Elizabeth Duffy Johnson, according to Amanda Kemp, said, I hate Jess King. She's trying to take us to socialism. You can't do that here. So it appears that first of all, you came out for a curious reason. I don't know why you thought what they were doing was wrong. And then once you find out that they support a candidate you don't like, well, then all of a sudden you are very, very animated. By the way, this Duffy lady is a member of the Republican Committee of Lancaster County. So she's officially a Republican, and she wants that couple out of there. So how about that community? Well, who's in it? Bent Creek, which was built in the 1990s, around a country club and a golf course, has been listed as one of the wealthiest 1,000 neighborhoods in the US and is nearly 90% white. Now, I don't know what the other 10% is, but apparently Duffy Johnson thought that it couldn't be these two folks. So is there anything wrong with a community that's wealthy around a country club? Of course not. Anything wrong with it being 90% white? Well, it happens to be 90% white. Okay, that's not the issue. The issue is when someone comes out and goes, what are you doing here? You don't look like us. Okay, now let's get more into the person who came out and started this altercation in the first place. The woman who was later identified as Elizabeth Duffy Johnson. Gee, I wonder if she's at the country club with a name like Duffy as a nickname. Anyway, a member of the Republican Committee of Lancaster County and a Smucker campaign volunteer took the couple's picture, and the white woman covered her face when they tried to take hers. Well, isn't that interesting, right? You guys are probably, she called the cops on him. So that's why she's taking the picture. She's like, I'm gonna get you guys. You look at Amanda Kemp. Does that look like a criminal? I mean, come on. I mean, maybe if you're racist, it does. Oh, she's black. Well, that by definition. She looks like the most normal American I have ever seen in my entire life. By the way, she is a visiting scholar at Franklin and Marshall College in Lancaster. Okay, but not to Duffy. Duffy views her to be a danger, so he starts taking pictures of her, calling the cops. When they try to take a picture of her, they're like, okay, that's all right. You take a picture of us, it's a free country, we'll take a picture of you. She's like, how dare you? How dare you? Well, what's wrong, Duffy? I thought you were on the side of righteousness and justice. Shouldn't you be proud? So, by the way, let's show you this happy couple here, happy other than what has happened to them now. And so, I can't believe that anybody would look at that couple and think it's a danger. How could you possibly think that? Okay. And then apparently Duffy went on to say, all this is private property. You can't be in here at all. I'm calling the police. And that she did. She called the cops, and the cops, and by the way, the couple said, all right, okay, fine. Nobody else but you complain. All we're doing is trying to get people to vote. So they left, they go home, and the cops pursued them. Apparently, Duffy recognized Michael Jimenez, the husband. And so, I don't mean like it's a hot pursuit or anything. They went to their house, and Jimenez, who Johnson had apparently recognized during their encounter, spoke with the officer, who asked a few questions before determining no criminal violations had taken place. Oh, you don't say. Turns out being an American and trying to get other people to vote is not criminal. Okay, and even doing it when you're a biracial couple, even that's not criminal. I know that's going to come as a huge shock to some Republican voters in this country, but it's not. And once again, white right-wingers, 911 is not takeout service, okay? It's not, hey, I'd like something delivered to my house. In this case, cops. I saw a black person and they're trying to get other people to vote. Man, I don't know when the Republican Party is going to get better, but it ain't soon, unfortunately. All right, especially when they're led by this guy. Let's go to the next story, Donald Trump. Okay. I love that graphic. Okay. So Donald Trump, being interviewed recently, asked, hey, I thought you said you were never going to tell a lie. Listen to what he says. The ending is very important and very telling, and then I'm going to show you some of his lies afterwards. Let's watch.
You remember well in the campaign, you made a promise.
In this journey, I will never lie to you. I will never tell you something I do not believe.
Can you tell me now, honestly, have you kept to that promise at all times? Have you always been
I try.
truthful?
I mean, I do try. I think you try too. You say things about me that are not necessarily correct. I do try, and I always want to tell the truth. When I can, I tell the truth.
When I can, I tell the truth. Well, what's stopping you, big guy? I try, I kind of try. Sometimes I try, a lot of times I don't try though. So now I'm gonna show you the times that he doesn't try. And he knows it. He knows he's a liar. That's why he gives that answer. Now, if you say to me, hey, Cenk, do you try to tell the truth? I say, absolutely. Look, is everyone accurate on every single issue? No, and sometimes even our audience corrects us and then we come out and correct it because we actually care about the truth. We care about getting it right. But Donald Trump doesn't care about that. He cares about winning. That's the only thing he cares about. In fact, if you remember, there was the story of how his friends at the National Enquirer printed a story about how Ted Cruz's dad might have killed JFK. And he spread that insane conspiracy theory on Fox News before their contest in Indiana. That was a very important contest that proved to be decisive. And he spread that smear job against Cruz. After that contest was over and Trump had won, Wolf Blitzer asked about it back in 2016. And listen to what Donald Trump said. Watch.
Yesterday, with this National Enquirer story, I just want you to clarify. You don't really believe that Ted Cruz's father had anything to do with the assassination of President Kennedy?
No, I don't.
And you don't believe in that conspiracy?
Of course I don't believe that. I wouldn't believe it, but I did say let people read it.
Amazing admission, right? He said before the election, yeah, I mean, people should check it out. I don't know. He said, it's crazy what might have happened, right? And then he turns around afterwards like, of course I didn't believe it. So then Wolf actually followed up here, and I want to give credit to Wolf Blitzer, which I don't often do. But look, I can't wait to give credit where credit is due, and so he did a good job of following up here and asked why Trump said that then. And his answer is very telling. Watch.
Here's what happened. Ted Cruz's father seems like a nice guy. Don't know him, but seems like a nice guy. He made horrible statements about me. You know, praying for bad things to happen to me. Okay, essentially. I said, that's horrible. And I was on a show, one of your competitors, and they showed me the clip. I said, wow, that's horrible. It's not just a one-way street, you know, where I do something. It was a horrible statement. I was actually surprised by it. And during that, and when I said how bad it was that a man would say something like that, I said, well, why don't you read the various magazines, because it's not only there, it was put in numerous, where he has a picture of himself with Lee Harvey Oswald. I'm not saying they
It was on the
conspired.
internet, but the National Enquirer put it on his
I'm
cover.
just saying it was all over the place. I said, well, why don't you talk about that? That was it. I'm not saying he did it, but I'm just saying it was all over the place.
But now that you're the Republican presumptive nominee, you have to have a higher standard than to repeat conspiratorial theories like that.
First of all, I wasn't at the time. I didn't know if I was going to win Indiana or not. So I was not a presumptive winner at that time. I was going against them. They were going against me.
2 parts there that are very, very telling. One, he says, well, you know, Rafael Cruz said horrible statements about me. So I said horrible statements.
We need to talk about a relatively new show called the Republic, or UNFTR. As a Young Turks fan, you already know that the government, the media, and corporations are constantly peddling lies that serve the interests of the rich and powerful. But now there's a podcast dedicated to unraveling those lies, debunking the conventional wisdom. In each episode of On the Republic, or UNFTR, the host delves into a different historical episode or topic that's generally misunderstood or purposely obfuscated by the so-called powers that be, featuring in-depth research, razor-sharp commentary, and just the right amount of vulgarity. The UNFTR podcast takes a sledgehammer to what you thought you knew about some of the nation's most sacred historical cows. But don't just take my word for it. The New York Times described UNFTR as consistently compelling and educational, aiming to challenge conventional wisdom and upend the historical narratives that were taught in school. For as the great philosopher Yoda once put it, you must unlearn what you have learned. And that's true whether you're in Jedi training or you're uprooting and exposing all the propaganda and disinformation you've been fed over the course of your lifetime. So search for UNFTR in your podcast app today and get ready to get informed, angered, and entertained all at the same time.
It's about him. Even though I just told you, I know that they're not true. Truth, it's optional. And then to me, the ending was even more telling, where he says, well, at the time, I hadn't won yet, so I had to win. That's what he cares about the most. In fact, when he was asked just in the last couple of days, hey, you call the press the enemy of the people all the time. That might get somebody killed. Are you concerned about that? He's like, well, that's how I win. In other words, you die, that's your problem, not my problem. I tell you nonstop lies and my voters are stupid enough to believe it. That's their problem, not my problem. All I care about is me, 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 me. So that is why he is lies on a regular basis. He's pathological about it. In fact, let me give you the numbers. The Washington Post fact checker reported last month that Trump had more than 5,000 false or misleading claims in the first 601 days of his presidency, an average of 8.3 claims a day. That's amazing. That's amazing. I've never seen anyone in public life lie at this record rate, let alone a politician, let alone the president of the United States. And as you just saw there with your own eyes, he does it as a strategy, as a tactic. He doesn't care. He has no moral qualms about it at all. That's why he just said yesterday, oh, the caravan, yeah, it might be funded by George Soros. Later, he'll say, yeah, I was doing it to win. Of course I was lying. Oh, did somebody send Soros a bomb? Who cares? Who cares? Oh, somebody shut up a synagogue. Who cares? I was doing it to win. Me, 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 me. The guy's sickening. But let's end on a little bit lighter, absurd note. I just want to give you one of the misstatements that he said recently. And this is from the Washington Post. He, for instance, said a middle-class tax cut would be passed by November 1st, even though Congress wasn't in session and had no plans to reconvene before the elections. Hey, today's November 1st. Did they pass it? No. Did they reconvene? No. Was there ever a bill to pass another tax cut along the lines that Donald Trump talked about? No. What did he do? Just lied about it. Just made it up, doesn't care. Why? He thinks, oh, well, that'll turn up my base. But you're turning out your base with a lie. And his answer to that is, and? How do you think I turned him out in the first place? Total, complete, pathological liar with no qualms, no morality around it, no empathy. And this is our president. Remember, the president is supposed to represent all of us. Do you think that he he views the job in that way in any shape, form? No, he views it as me, 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 me. The rest of you, that's your problem, not my problem. Okay, we got to take a quick break here. When we come back, my predictions about the House and the Senate, who will win, who will lose. I obviously decide, so the truth no, it's a prediction, but it would give you a sense before the elections as to where I think the range is going to be and what you can expect. Am I optimistic about it? Only one way to find out. Come right back. All right, welcome back to the Young Turks. We will do your comments a little bit later. And of course, we take the member comments first. If you want to become a member, tyt.com/join. And we're doing a fun little competition, which we'll talk about a little bit later in the program. But I've got a lot of news for you guys, so let's get going. Okay, let's go over here. Okay, so Donald Trump recently asked to explain if he cares if the media is going to be attacked, because he keeps calling them the enemy of the people. I'm gonna set this up for you guys and then go to Fox and Friends afterwards to get their reaction of how the media should bow their heads to Trump and what their journalistic standards are, which is fascinating. But first, let's find out what the context was. Here's the original question that started the conversation.
Scares the crap out of me is that if you're saying enemy of the people, God forbid,
I have to fight back. You're right.
No, but hold on a second. But one second. But this thing, God forbid that somebody you've got fervent supporters. They love you. They listen to you. Enemy of the people. Enemy of the people.
They like me more because of that.
They like you more. But what happens if all of a sudden someone gets shot? Someone shoots one of these reporters. Don't you worry at all? I mean, you are like the most powerful man in the world, and if you say that word, enemy, literally tens of thousands of people go into a stadium to listen to you, and then people go on social media and they get themselves so jazzed up. There's got to be a party that's like, damn it, I'm scared that someone is going to take it too
It's
far.
my only form of fighting back. I couldn't be here if I did that.
So great questions by Axios there, and it was Jim Vandehei doing the questioning in that particular exchange, and I'm glad somebody finally asked it of him, and his answer is, yeah, but that's my form of fighting back. All I care about is winning. Whether you guys get shot is your problem, not my problem. So if you're in the press or the media, like Fox News theoretically is, well, that might concern you. And to be fair to Fox, some of their anchors have spoken out saying, maybe calling the press the enemy of the people, not a great idea, because apparently many months into this, they looked around where they're like, oh, right, we're pretending to be the press. That's funny. But yeah, all right, so maybe you shouldn't do that. But only a couple of their anchors said that. So now Fox and Friends is his home base. We're home of progressives. Fox and Friends is home of Trump. So are they going to defend their own people in the media, or are they going to defend Trump? Now, you know which way this is going to go. But Ainsley Earhardt here at the end says something incredible for someone that's theoretically in the press. Let's watch.
How frustrating would it be if you're the president of the United States and every single time you turn on the TV, on most of the channels, they're misconstruing what you say, and you know your heart and you know your words and you know your voice, and then you watch other people report on what you say and it's completely different than what you mean. Well, that has to be frustrating, and that's why he's saying it's fake news. And he's saying if you don't want to be called the enemy, then get the story right, be accurate, and report the story the way that I want it reported.
Yeah, I think it's a good point.
No, it's not a good point. It's a terrible point. She said at the end there, if you don't want me to call you names, well, then report the story the way I want it reported. Well, if we didn't live in a democracy, I guess that is how it would work. Kim Jong-un, another friend of Donald Trump, would love it that way and has it that way because he's a dictator. So he says, if you don't report the news the way I want, we're probably executed, at least gonna go to a gulag, that's for sure. Another friend of his, Vladimir Putin. Ooh, you better be careful. If you don't report the news the way that Putin wants, a piano can fall on your head by accident, okay? And on it goes. But that is not how the press is supposed to work in America. We're supposed to report reality, whether it is convenient or inconvenient to the people in charge. The press is supposed to be the watchdogs. Now, look, I think that they've fallen asleep on that job for a great number of decades at this point, and I think they should have been a lot more aggressive in questioning both Republican and Democratic presidents and politicians. So I can give you 1,000 examples. I mean, obviously the Iraq War is a stunning example of the failure of the media to be watchdogs. They were lapdogs at that time. And the list goes on, but they never questioned Obama on his drone strikes either that killed innocent civilians. They don't question all the politicians on their donors, which actually is an enormous form of corruption that goes completely unmentioned in television, except for when now we talk about it on television, so you're welcome. But if you had those criticism of the press, that would make sense. But the Fox News criticism is the exact opposite. They say, no. If you would just bow your head to the president and report the news in the way that he would like, in other words, with political correctness, then everything would be fine. Understand that word political correctness is not some modern term applied to things that give you offense. No, that's a term both from Stalinist Russia and from Nazi Germany, where they told the media, you are not to report what is factually correct, you are to report what is politically correct, what the politicians want you to report. Well, they would have loved that segment. That's keeping it real. Okay, now on to the main event. Let's go to my predictions. Okay. Now, I want to give you a sense of where we are today in the House and the Senate, and then tell you what I think is going to happen in just a couple of days in the 2018 elections. So first, obviously, there's 435 people in the House of Representatives, and I want to give you the breakdown as it currently stands. There are 195 Democratic seats and 240 Republican seats. That's why, of course, the Republicans control the House of Representatives, and significantly so. That's a big margin, obviously, that is in favor of the Republicans. There's actually technically 7 vacancies, but of those vacancies, 5 are in Republican seats and 2 are in Democratic seats. That's how you arrive at 240 to 195, and so that's a 45 seat advantage for the Republicans. I took math in college. And so can the Democrats really overcome that? Well, let's take a look at basically the map of the House here, so you get a sense of where things stand. Graphic 26. So a lot more red than blue, and then you've got those vacancies. But as I explained to you, the breakdown of those, you have a sense of where it stands. All right, now how many seats do the Democrats need to pick up to make that swing? Well, they need to pick up 24 seats so that they can get to at least 218. And obviously the seats they pick up, the Republicans lose, and that's how the math works. Once again, I took a little bit of math in school. Okay, so now the relevant part is how many seats do I think the Democrats are going to pick up? Now, I looked at the polling. I looked at all the different websites that track this, and on top of that, I did my own analysis. Now, the point of this is not to beat my chest and say, oh, I got it right, or later say I got it wrong if I did, which I do. If I do get it wrong, of course, I share that with you guys. The point is to give you guys a sense of the lay of the land and give you a sense of what people's expectations are and why I think they're a little off. So, for example, if you go to Real Clear Politics, they track all the polling and they aggregate the polling, and they believe that Democrats are going to pick up 26 seats. According to the polling, that is not their opinion. They say, look, we're tracking the polling, the average of the polling. I think there's a reason why the polling is a little off, and they say 26. That would be barely enough for the Democrats to win back the House. Well, I think that there are a number of issues with that. I think, first of all, most of the polling tracks likely voters, and when there is great enthusiasm and energy, as there is on the Democratic side in this particular election, it undercounts the number of people who are actually going to show up. Now, in 2016, that was actually an advantage for Donald Trump and the Republicans. He had unlikely voters show up. In fact, that's why we warned you ahead of time that election was nowhere near a lock, as the rest of the press was saying. I explained 5 days before that election that the polling actually indicated that Hillary was only up by 2 points in Pennsylvania, and that could easily swing. And we saw unlikely voters come in for Donald Trump during the primaries. We saw unlikely voters come in for Bernie Sanders during the primaries because they are unconventional candidates. They're more populist candidates. That's why Bernie Sanders was supposed to lose Michigan by 18, but actually won it by 2. And that is why Hillary Clinton had problems in Michigan and wound up, of course, losing Michigan, because it's not that the polling is not scientific, it's that they're looking at a slightly wrong group on average but they wouldn't be, by the way, if it's an establishment candidate versus an establishment candidate, which is a lot of the Senate. So I'll get to that in a second. But especially when there are populist candidates. So the one I cite often is Richard Ojeda in West Virginia's 3rd district. Trump won his district by 49 points. So on none of the maps was Ojeda's race remotely close. They're like, oh, well, that's a no-brainer. The previous Republican congressman there won his seat, his election by 44 points. That is not a close district at all. And normally that would be true. That is right. It is not a close district. But Ojeda is nearly tied in the polling. Now, even so, though, a lot of the people covering these races will go, nah, but he can't possibly win, because that is a red district. That is a really Republican district. But what you're missing is, if someone runs as a populist, as Ojeda is doing, well, that's a totally different ball game. One, he closed a 49-point lead, which is amazing, and that is already being seen in the polls. And number 2, more people might show up than the polls indicate, because he is going to get unlikely voters to come out. So now, I wish there were more populist progressive candidates, then our chances would be significantly higher. Unfortunately, especially in the Senate, there's a lot of corporate Democrats, and they don't engender a lot of energy. But there is a national wave and a national energy, and I've already seen it in the primaries. Far more women showed up to vote than have almost ever shown up to vote. And so it depends on the state, it depends on the district, but overall, on average, women came out in record numbers in the primaries. If they do so in similar numbers in the election that's coming up in 2018 for the House and the Senate, well, you'll have a dramatically different view of it. I looked at the early voting to see, does it match up with the polling? Did it match up with the primaries? And there the answer is honestly mixed. So in some states like Texas, a lot of younger voters are showing up, certainly more than you would see on average. So Ted Cruz better watch himself. You never know what happens there. The younger voters are going overwhelmingly to Beto O'Rourke, according to the polling, and according to every other thing we've seen nationally. There's more young voters in Georgia, so that is not a good sign for Kemp in that race, in the governor's race. It's a very good sign for Stacey Abrams. Unfortunately, overall, though, the younger voters in most of the states are not showing up in record numbers. If young people voted at the same rate as people above the age of 65, the Republicans would be completely wiped out. I mean, not wiped out, hey, they lost the House and the Senate by a little bit. They would barely exist as a party. The problem is young people don't vote at anywhere near the rates of older voters, okay? But finally, on the issue of women, which is, and by the way, sorry, Latinos, very important too. If Latinos showed up the same numbers as white voters or even black voters, again, the Republicans would be toast. But unfortunately, the early voting on Latinos is also mixed. Now, on women, that is where the energy is. And they are voting at greater rates than men already in early voting. And because of that, the Democrats, I think, will pick up a lot more seats than others do. Now, I wish the numbers in early voting were a little bit higher, but unlikely voters are also more likely to show up on the day of the election rather than mailing in their ballots earlier. So is there a good deal of speculation in here? Of course there is. But I'm trying to do a real analysis for you guys, as we did in 2016 and got it relatively right, as we've done throughout. And that's why I told you Donald Trump was going to win the Republican nomination, because we looked at the polling and we looked at the trends, and numbers matter. It isn't about who you want to win, it's about who do you think's actually going to win. So, having said all that, I haven't crunched the numbers to the best of my ability. I believe the Democrats will pick up 38 seats. Now, that is more than 24 they need. It's more than the 26 that The polling average indicates, at least on Real Clear Politics, and obviously different sites look at it slightly differently and look at slightly different polls, but 26 is a number that makes sense based on the polling. I think they're going to go to 38. Now, could they go higher? Yes. But first, let me share what the map would look like if it is 38. So then the Democrats would have the House, and they would have it significantly. They would have 233 seats, and the Republicans would have only 202 seats. Basically, it'd be a role reversal where the Democrats then could easily pass any legislation they want. Will they? Well, that's a different question. We'll handle that after the election. And believe me, we'll put a lot of pressure on them to actually do what they said they were going to do to continue to energize the voters. But I actually think the range is not 26 to 38. I think the range of Democratic pickups in the House is 38 to 50. And the only reason why I don't have it at 50 at the upper end of the range is because the early voting is not quite at the level that I would hope for in the demographics that would help the Democrats. And also because there's still a lot of corporate Democrats out there running Republican-like campaigns. I think that the populists are completely underrated, but so far there's not quite enough of them. I hope that in 2020 that changes after the populist progressives come up with victories that were unexpected. We already have had a lot of those, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez in a very blue district, but Cara Eastman in a very red district. And so if the Cara Eastmans of the world win, and the Ojettas win, and there's so many others out there, just check out justdemocrats.com to see those progressive populist candidates, then I think we could run more of those in 2020 and have bigger victories. But to give you a sense of what I think is the bias in the rest of the press, Washington Post did a story about the chances of Democratic pickups in Virginia. And there's a corporate Democrat that they said could win their race, even though she is trailing by 8 points. There's a more populist progressive, a strong progressive, Coburn in Virginia's 5th district, running against Riggleman, who is a very extreme right-winger. They say that she does not have a good chance of winning, but she's actually tied. See, look at the bias. They're not actually looking at the polling. So in Washington, they have a preset mindset, and Ryan Grimm did a great story about this in the Intercept recently, along with Brianna Gray. And they say that the Democratic Party, and unfortunately a lot of the media, is obsessed with what they call Whole Foods districts, like suburban districts where they think they're going to flip Republican voters. Yeah, but no, you got to get your base to show up. If the Democratic base shows up, they win an astounding number of victories. The Democrats have a registration advantage over the Republicans in so many of these districts that even ones that are considered red, no, the Democrats have the registration advantage. The problem is the base doesn't show up. Why? Because you don't give them anything to show up over. So the Democratic strategy is run corporate, business-friendly, pro-war candidates because they'll appeal to suburban Republican voters who think corporations are awesome and war is awesome and go to Whole Foods. And so because of that lens that they wear, they go, oh, somebody's down by 8, they'll probably win because they're a corporatist. Oh, someone's tied, they'll probably lose because they're a progressive. That makes no sense at all. That's exactly what they did wrong in 2016. That's why I think it could go all the way up to 50 if some of those progressives win races that the rest of the press does not expect. But I wish they had more populist progressives, then we can get to the higher end of that range. Now, I want to do the Senate real quick as well. Obviously, there's 100 senators, you guys know that. And currently today, there's 51 Republicans and 49 Democrats. And so that is really close. Unfortunately, there's a lot more Democratic seats up than Republican seats. So it is much harder to win the Senate, even though it's a smaller margin. It's overwhelmingly Democratic seats that are up for re-election because a third of the Senate goes up for re-election every 2 years. The next 2 cycles, by the way, there will be a lot more Republican seats up, and then they're in for a world of hurt. But in this cycle, everybody believes that the Democrats are probably not going to be able to pull out a victory. In fact, they think they might lose 1 or 2 seats in this cycle. Well, look, here I'm less certain because a lot of the Democratic candidates are Republican light, total conservative corporate Democrats. And so they're going to shoot themselves in the foot. But I do believe that the wave is real. I believe that more women will show up. And I believe that there's a lot of people angry about Donald Trump. And I also believe, and this is important, that Donald Trump's strategy of trying to turn out his base by being more and more hateful almost every day leading up to the election, yes, will turn up a couple of more people in his base, but will actually anger enough people in the Democratic base to have more of them show up. I think it is a counterproductive strategy as things stand now. And you have to understand something. Last point on this is just very important and is not taken into account by the rest of the media enough. Donald Trump needed 85% of white evangelical voters to show up for him to win in 2016. And 81% of them voted for Donald Trump. That is an astounding number. It's nearly impossible to replicate. In fact, if you take white evangelical, in this case specifically, less educated white evangelical voters out, do you know that Hillary Clinton actually won non-college educated white voters by a large margin? So it's almost exclusively the evangelical base that is propping up the Republican Party. But if they don't show up at an 85% rate, which is record-breaking, the rate that they showed up at 2016, then the Republicans are in a world of trouble. So despite the fact that there are these corporate Democrats out there running, in my opinion, terrible races across the country on the Senate side, I believe that the Democrats will actually pick up a seat. So I think they're going to pick up 1 seat, and the result at the end will be 50-50, a tie in the Senate. So, look, and I think that I can tell you some of the results already. Heidi Heitkamp thought it was a genius idea to run as Republican light in North Dakota. It is not. She's getting crushed and she will lose. And I think that we are going to pick up some seats that are unexpected. It could be Tennessee. It could be Mississippi of all places. It could be Texas. But we will get, my sense is a victory or 2 that is totally unexpected. But unfortunately, I think that one or couple of the corporate Democrats will bungle it. A candidate like Joe Donnelly, who's running nonstop ads celebrating the Republican Party, a candidate like that could easily lose because they didn't make their own case. Instead, they made the Republican case, and that is usually a recipe for failure. And at the end of the day, we might look around and go, oh my God, we had it. We could have even had the Senate if one of these knuckleheads hadn't lost a race they had no business losing. So we'll see, but that is my expectations for what's gonna happen. The good news is we're all gonna find out together. So tyt.com/live will be on all day. We'll start at 1 p.m. and probably go to about 1 a.m. Eastern. We'll also have special coverage from 6 to 11 p.m. on Monday, do a pre-election show. We'll talk about this and get more into the particulars of the different races and the ballot measures and the governor's races. But don't miss a minute of our election coverage because this is not a hyperbole. This is the most important midterm election of our lifetime. All right, we got to take a break. We'll be right back. We hope you're enjoying this free clip from the Young Turks. If you want to get the whole show and more exclusive content while supporting independent media, become a member at tyt.com/join today. In the meantime, enjoy this free segment. All right, back on the Young Turks. Let's go to member comments first. tyt.com/join to become a member. J.K. Bakies writes in, if Trump feels his words aren't being reported the way he means them, and everyone's reporting the same thing, it sounds like Trump's a really bad. At TYT, we frequently talk about all the ways that big tech companies are taking control of our online lives, constantly monitoring us and storing and selling our data. But that doesn't mean we have to let them. It's possible to stay anonymous online and hide your data from the prying eyes of big tech. And one of the best ways is with ExpressVPN. ExpressVPN hides your IP address, making your activity more difficult to trace and sell to advertisers. ExpressVPN also encrypts 100% of your network data to protect you from eavesdroppers and cyber criminals. And it's also easy to install. A single mouse click protects all your devices. But listen, guys, this is important. ExpressVPN is rated #1 by CNET and Wired Magazine. So take back control of your life online and secure your data with a top VPN solution available, ExpressVPN. And if you go to expressvpn.com/TYT, you can get 3 extra months for free with this exclusive link just for TYT fans. That's expressvpn.com/TYT. Check it out today. Communicator. It's a very fair point. You should look into that. I Am Sock writes in, Cenk is already dusting off his told you crystal ball graphic. Well, we'll have to see, isn't it? So come and see, Republicans, come and see. TYT.com/live on election night. Shadow President 420 writes in, Democrats and people on the left should never forget that there are a hell of a lot more poor and middle class people than there are rich. If we can just get everyone to vote their own economic interests, we win every election by representing the vast majority of the people. And by the way, if you don't know why the Democrats don't do that obvious, super obvious strategy, it's because they're hooked on the donor money and the donors are rich. So they don't want to say, hey, let's help the poor and the middle class, because the donors go, hey, where's my tax cuts, right? And a lot of donors say, hey, I'm socially liberal, and they are. So give the Democratic donors credit on that, way better than the Republican donors, but fiscally conservative. In other words, I still want my tax cuts. So otherwise, if you're not tethered to the donors, you would run like Ojeda does. You would run like so many of these wonderful progressives do. You would run like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez did. I mean, she beat the #4 Democrat in the House, and she beat him with a stick, okay, proverbially, right? Why? She actually ran towards the middle class. And Crowley, why was he the #4 Democrat in the House? Because he took among the most corporate donor money out of everyone in the House. Oops, it turns out if you get challenged and all you do is serve the rich, it's not a good strategy to win an election. Turns out there's a lot more poor and middle class, just like you say, than there are rich. Okay, and by the way, that you don't have to hate the rich or be against the rich. No, all we want is a fair tax system, a fair regulatory system, one that represents all of us. Okay, Eclectic Miscellanea on Twitter writes in, can you imagine being the person who has to keep track of all of Trump's lies? That has got to be the most depressing job in journalism. Fair enough. Hashtag TYT Live. Talk to us on Twitter during the show. We'll take a lot of your tweets in our election coverage too. Thoughts on Spoken on YouTube Super Chat says, from North Dakota, caught Cenk mentioning Heitkamp and I could only laugh. She's doomed in my opinion, only because Kramer supporting ads always mention Trump and Hillary. There are tons of us here in North Dakota that want this over. Yes, because you know why you want it over? Because Heitkamp doesn't fight for you. If she fought for you, then you'd be rooting her on and you'd be hoping that she wins and you'd bring everybody to the polls. Instead, Heitkamp says, oh, the Republicans are largely right, but I'm not so bad either. That's why she's getting beat, I think, by 16 points. So, Jesus, man, they never learn. Anyway, let's go over here. We sent our reporter, Emma Vigeland, to a Trump rally to ask a simple question. You say you're for the Constitution, but Donald Trump says he's going to take away birthright citizenship, which is clearly in the Constitution. So how do you explain that? Let's find out.
I agree with Trump wholeheartedly.
Even though it's a part of the Constitution? And
even though it's part of the Constitution. You know, the Constitution's a couple of 300 years old, so I think it's time to change things, and that's why I'm
not the Second Amendment, though.
Never the Second Amendment. We have the right to defend ourselves.
Look, it's a couple of 300 years old. Bless his heart. That's nothing wrong with that, okay? But my amusement, of course, is centered around the Constitution is the most important thing. Almost everybody at the rally, Constitution, Constitution, right? But Trump wants to change the Constitution. Yeah, that's awesome. We should change the Constitution. How about the Second Amendment? Oh, no, don't change the Constitution. By the way, it is okay. It's perfectly acceptable to say, yeah, some things should be amended. For example, we should get money out of politics. But just think about it for a second. Have a principle, have an ideology. Are you pro-Constitution? And by the way, that doesn't mean you're against amendments. I'm massively pro-Constitution. I think our Constitution is wonderful. But part of our Constitution is amendments. That's the whole point. The Founding Fathers said you should change the Constitution from time to time. That would be a normal, acceptable answer. Not, oh, do we never change it? I mean, okay, change it, but don't change it. Here's more of that.
Absolutely should be done. It was designed for when the time of slavery came in, and it was designed for those people, so it would be for their kids. It wasn't designed for this. It's retarded. So we definitely need to change it, and the better way is to do it through Congress. If he does it through executive order, it could be undone, so it's better to try to do it through Congress. But absolutely.
But you want to change the Constitution, which conservatives like to say they're strict constitutionalists.
I am too. But it was not written to do this.
No, actually, it was written to do this. That's why it's in the Constitution. It says anyone who's born here is a citizen, and the writing is incredibly clear. Read the 14th Amendment. And of course, as usual, they have the facts completely wrong. Well, I mean, the executive order is not as good. Congress should do it. No, a bill could not change the Constitution either. Only an amendment could. If he clarified that 2/3 of Congress should propose an amendment, or 2/3 of the states should do a convention to propose an amendment, and then 3/4 of the states should ratify, okay. But no, you cannot change the Constitution through an executive order or through a bill through Congress. I don't know, is it too much to ask? Okay, maybe you don't know all the particulars of that. That's fine, you're a random dude showing up at a rally. But don't pretend that you're a huge fan of the Constitution and think that it should be changed in a way that is unconstitutional. Both the substance is unconstitutional and the process he suggested is also unconstitutional. And remember when the Republicans complained that Obama did too many executive orders. Let's note that irony as well. One more.
There's a portion of the Constitution that says, depending on the legality, and that's what his lawyer said he can do, because we're originalists.
Yeah,
we believe in the intent of the Constitution. You have to follow it.
Well, it was upheld in 1898 in the Supreme Court decision for a Chinese immigrant coming over. They said, yes, you can keep your children here even if you weren't here legally.
1898?
Yeah, Supreme Court decision.
They didn't foresee what was going on today back then.
I mean, they didn't know so many Latinos were coming. I mean, then they would have voted against it, obviously. Okay, no, there are no serious constitutional scholars that think that, I mean, because of the legality of it, that people born in America should not be citizens. That is not a real legal opinion. But the reason they think that is because Trump says it. Now, do you think Trump actually talked to a single constitutional scholar about this? Of course he didn't talk to any constitutional scholars. He's not even gonna do it. I mean, look, if they win the House and the Senate, then he might do it, so don't get too comfortable about that. But is his intent to pass that executive order or sign the executive order or pass a bill? Or to even get an amendment? Of course not. No, his intent is to rile up that particular base and go, the Latinos are coming, they're in a caravan, they're invading. Oh my God, we gotta do something. All right, you know what, I'm gonna end their birthright citizenship, kick them all out. Wait, I thought you guys said just a minute ago that you were for legal citizens and legal immigrants, and you were just, it's not racial. It's just that you gotta follow the rule of law, and so that's why you were against illegal immigrants or undocumented immigrants. It turns out, no, you're also against legal immigrants and legal citizens, and you're against the Constitution. At least own up to it. At least have the intellectual honesty to say, yes, I mean, for as long as we've had the 14th Amendment, everyone born here has been a United States citizen. But we would like to change that through an amendment because we don't like some people. And we don't want them to be citizens, so we're gonna rule them out. By the way, as we pointed out to you in a segment a couple of days ago, Donald Trump Jr., Eric Trump, and Ivanka Trump, all born to a mom who was not a US citizen at the time. Ivana Trump was not a US citizen when they were born. So if we're kicking people out, look, all the Trump kids were born in America. They have birthright citizenship. But if it turns out Trump takes away birthright citizenship, send them back, send them back. So I'd like to see what their reaction to that is. No, you see, you should, but birthright, but for white people, but not for the other guys. We should change the Constitution, but we should never change it, but we should change it for that. Keep the whites the birthright, but not the others. Looking forward to that next time. Okay, all right, one last story for you guys in this so-called hour. Okay. Chris Kobach is a person who is the leading advocate of the idea of voter fraud in this country, and hence the leading advocate for voter suppression. So voter fraud is a myth. I'm going to explain to you the real numbers after I show you this clip from CNN. and it is used to depress a gigantic amount of votes throughout the country. In fact, millions of votes throughout the country. I'll show you the relative scale of the so-called problem and the so-called solution. But first, Jeffrey Toobin does a wonderful job of actually holding Kobach to account here on CNN and not letting up. Let's watch.
I mean, Chris has devoted his career to stopping black people and poor people from voting. I mean, that's been your goal for decades.
That is
and
that is an outrageous accusation.
Well, it's completely true.
That is
I
an
mean,
absolutely outrageous accusation.
I mean,
so if you like photo ID, you're trying to stop people of color from voting?
Absolutely.
That is outrageous.
Absolutely.
And by the way, when this question is polled, the vast majority of African Americans approve of photo ID. So apparently they're trying to do what you're saying I'm trying to do. That is outrageous. It is such a horrible accusation.
It is a completely true accusation because, Chris, I mean, your whole career has, I mean, that's why you had this phony voter suppression commission that was such a preposterous joke established by the president that it just disbanded because it couldn't prove your claim that voter fraud is a problem in this country. Your problem is that some people vote for Democrats, and you want to stop that by establishing voter requirements.
I love that Toobin didn't let up, because normally what happens is a Republican does fall outrage, like, oh, how could you? I am shocked and chagrined to find out that you think I'm doing voter suppression. Chris, every astute observer of politics knows you're doing voter suppression. You're the leading advocate of voter suppression in the country. That's why Trump put you on that commission. I'm going to get to that commission in a second because the results of that was hilarious, and Toobin is 100% right. So now let me give you a sense of voter fraud numbers in the country. There's been a great number of studies on it. Back in 2014, there was a study that from the Brennan Center for Justice. Let me read that for you. I'm sorry, this one's from the Washington Post, actually. Brennan Center for Justice reported on it. A comprehensive 2014 study published in the Washington Post found 31 credible instances of impersonation fraud from 2000 to 2014. Oh, wow, there's 31 cases. Okay, is that real? Out of more than 1 billion ballots cast, even this tiny number is likely inflated, as the study's author counted not just prosecutions or convictions, but any and all credible claims. 31 out of 1 billion. Is that a real problem in this country? I don't know if you're good at math or not, but trust me that is incredibly insignificant. In fact, don't trust me, let me give you the numbers. The numbers come out to, and now this is from the Brennan Center for Justice on a different study, and this is actually higher than the Washington Post numbers. The incident rates of voter fraud ranged between, in their study, 0.0003% and 0.0025%. Okay, that is minuscule, minuscule. Now you can say, hey, well, look, the Washington Post thing's from 2014. That's a whole 4 years ago. Still a very new study. The Brennan Center for Justice, they care about justice, so they lean a little left, okay? But I want to give, so I'm going to go to the commission in a second because that's the Republicans. But first, a fun fact about how small those numbers are. It is more likely, the report noted, that an American will be, quote, struck by lightning than that he will impersonate another voter at the polls. Okay, that is how rare it is. So Kobach, though, says, all right, we need to do a commission. Trump agrees. Trump said that he was worried that 3 to 5 million people had done voter fraud in 2016. That's why Hillary won the popular vote. What a preposterous, insane lie that is. I mean, that's one of his biggest lies, and that's saying a lot. So they did the commission. They're going to find the 3 to 5 million illegal votes, except they found nothing. They disbanded it. Toobin's right. They're like, it was so embarrassing. They couldn't find any voter fraud. So they're like, never mind. We didn't want this commission in the first place. So then they asked Kobach, they said, well, you did the whole commission, you got nothing. He said, no, there's been cases. So this was his best case. The commission was presented with a report claiming over 1,000 convictions for various forms of voter misconduct since 1948. Wow. Okay, so I did the math on this, so take it with a grain of salt because it's my math. But roughly about 4 billion votes since 1948, okay? And if you divide 1,000 by 4 billion, the voter fraud rate, according to Kobach's own numbers, is 0.0000025%. That is actually the lowest of all the numbers. So even Kobach's big claim was way lower than any other report's numbers because it isn't a real problem. It's a giant lie. So then, of course, that leads to the question of why? Why do they do this lie? What do you mean voter suppression? Well, the thing is, if you say you need a photo ID to vote, well, a lot of people don't have photo ID. Now, most people do have photo ID, so they think, well, I mean, everybody's got a photo ID, don't they? What's the big deal? The answer is no. A lot of people who live in cities don't have photo IDs because they don't have cars. They take subways, they take buses, etc. A lot of poor people don't have photo IDs because they don't have cars. And even if they don't live in a city. And it turns out, this is stunning, 25% of African Americans in this country do not have a photo ID, whereas only 8% of white Americans don't. Even though, by the way, that 8% is also a giant number. Those are millions upon millions of voters that go to vote and they go, nope, sorry. If Chris Kobach has his way and he's now running for governor of Kansas and overseeing his own election in a sense because he appointed all the people in that election. By the way, I would double check that election. I would triple check that election. Chris Kobach, I mean, you want to talk about voter fraud. What happened in Johnson County in the primaries was very questionable. And that Democrat, if it's anywhere near a close election, should immediately challenge it because Kobach put into place all the people that are in charge of counting the votes. And Kobach wants to deny people the right to vote. That's the whole point of his career. That's the number one thing that he's known for. If anyone's gonna cheat, it's gonna be Chris Kobach. So here's a guy who says we should deny millions of people across the country the right to vote, and especially African Americans because it affects them more, the poor because it affects them more, people who live in cities rather than in rural areas. These are all more likely to be Democratic voters, and he knows that, and that's the whole point, to tackle a non-existent problem. Their real problem is they don't want black people to vote because they think they're gonna vote Democratic. They don't want poor people, they don't want young people to vote because they think they're gonna vote Democratic. And that is the real fraud. And thank God somebody on TV finally called it out. All right, we gotta take a break. When we come back, a lot more. There's an amazing story of the son of a Ferguson protester who was hung with a noose. And it's an interesting story. Don't jump to conclusions. Let's talk about it when we come back. Thanks for listening to the full episode of The Young Turks. Support our work, listen ad-free, access members-only bonus content, and more by subscribing to Apple Podcasts at apple.co/TYT. I'm your host, Cenk Uygur, and I'll see you soon.